to give us a status of where is the bus terminal and the Lincoln Tunnel under COVID. So that's
great.
Yeah, that's something we had asked for, and we are really pleased that you were able to make it.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so with that said, and this is a virtual meeting by virtue of the fact that we are required to do virtual meetings with due to COVID. So we will be following the procedures for these virtual meetings. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to our pals at the Port Authority.
Thanks, Dale. I'm Justin Bernbach. I'm the Director of Government Relations Government and Community Relations for New York. For the Port Authority, I will take you through the first part of the presentation. We have been joined by Steve Plate, who I know he had another commitment. So but Steve was very eager to be here. I thought he'd be joining in progress, but he made it for the beginning. But still, we're going to go with Plan A, and Glenn Guzzi's from Steve's shop, is going to present the second half. So also on the panel, so it's me, Mike Lavery from Government Community Relations, Steve Plate, as I mentioned, Chief of Major Capital Projects, Glenn Guzzi, his right-hand man in that department, Kate Bertel is on from TV&T, and then to handle that second half of the presentation that Christine mentioned, or the second presentation on the operations, it's going to be Jerry Lindenmeyer and Kirsten, who should be joining shortly. And then we have some other Port Authority people on as well, but not on the panel. So I'll take you through the presentation. And as Dale said, it is a high-level presentation. I know this board's really lived this project for a long time, and with us, for the last few years. But this is basically what was presented publicly last month when we did a press announcement on this. And it is, I think I said last week when we gave this presentation, it's probably a good thing that it is high level and that most of this project is not yet designed or fully baked, but this is a visual presentation of the project description, basically. So, that's what we're going to be taking you through. So next slide, please. So this is where we are in the process. We're basically at stage 2 of this process that you see right now. Stage 1 happened. I'll take you through a little more detailed things that happened even pre-stage 1, but the public meetings that we did and the draft scoping document that we released back in May of 19, and the meetings that we did subsequent to that were really part 1. We now are at the point where we've released the final scoping report, and we're about to initiate the NEPA process. And then these other stages will follow, and as you'll see, they all have a lot of opportunity for public input. And as also we'll get into the community board and other of the key stakeholders on the West Side are going to have even a higher level of input into this process. Next slide. So again, the Port Authority bus terminal, for better or worse, and it's definitely for worse for us because it's called the Port Authority and many people think we're interchangeable with that building. It doesn't have a great reputation historically. These are some of the recent references in pop culture and the media. And this is what we're looking to change and what we've been looking to change for the better part of a decade. So next slide. So as you know, the terminal, I think most people know this, the terminal is, if I'm doing my math right, 71 years old, and the second wing of that was built in 1981 is now 40 years old. And, this is part of the reason it is old and nearing the end of its, useful life as a transportation facility, and one of the reasons it needs to be replaced. Next slide. But it is, right now the world's busiest bus terminal and only projected to get busier. You see the specs on 186 gates, 20 carriers, 17 bathrooms, 76 million travelers, which works out to, on the average weekday, 260,000 passengers. And again, it is beyond what it was planned for, even when it was expanded in 1981. Next slide. So there's a long history that many on this call and others on the board have been involved in. But the planning for the replacement really started in earnest in 2013, and it's gone through many different phases. The Midtown Bus Master Plan study in 2015 was not warmly received by the community and other members of the public and elected officials. We moved on to solicit new ideas for the bus terminal in an international design competition, which did generate some interesting concepts, but also paved the way for a build in place study. That was one of the recommendations, is that we should look at building in place, and that work began in 2017, and that was about the time that Steve Plates, correct me if I'm wrong, others on the call, but I believe that's about the time the major capital projects took over as the point on replacing the terminal. And the focus from that point forward was to build it on the same footprint. And it's gone through a couple of iterations of how that would be done, but that's kind of where we've been for 4 years. All in all, there were 30 separate proposals that came out of all these efforts over the course of that 4-year period. Next slide. So as I mentioned on the first slide, we did release a draft scoping document. One thing I should mention really quickly is that the EIS process, as is currently the NEPA process, and environmental impact statements that are produced through that process, has for the last couple of years been constrained by a 24-month clock. That is a requirement of the from the notice of intent, which has not yet come in this process, but is imminent, to the record of decision, is supposed to take place over 24 months. So because of those new guidelines, several of the federal agencies have encouraged local partners like us to begin some of those scoping activities before the EIS process officially starts. That's really what happened in 2019. We released the draft scoping document. It looked at 13 different alternatives of the 30 I mentioned before. It laid out the initial project scope and goals and objectives, which changed, which I'm going to talk about, and laid out screening criteria to pick the best 1 or 2 or 3 to move on further into the environmental process. Next. So these were the 2 main screening criteria. At first, we were looking to meet a 30% increase in demand over that 260,000 or whatever it was at the time, but a big increase in demand that we expect for 2040. And even with some of the the interruption and the disruptions of the last year, we still expect that. We're still working with that projection for ridership and needed capacity. And as I said, really starting after the design, with the design deliverability competition. But once we started focusing on build in place, the idea was we were not going to take any private property to build this. So that became one of the main early criteria. Next slide. So these are the 3 alternatives that were advanced in the planning document. As the build in place was the main focus of the agency, but we did look at a couple of these other concepts. And the RPA concept, as we call it, is split operation between the current terminal and the Javits Center, and the Perkins Eastman was all west of 11th Avenue. So these were the options that were reviewed. Next slide. So, in summer of 19, I should say here again, these were not, the feedback we got in the summer of 19 was not a surprise. It came largely from Community Board 4, and we had been meeting with them for some time. But these became, these were the overwhelming result of the public meetings we did. And there was a very influential letter that CB4 wrote as part of that. And this was the input that we received. The west of 11th Avenue was not going to work. It was not good for the riders, and it wasn't good for the community because of for the same reason, basically, which is all the ground that riders would have to traverse to get to public transit, or to get to, I should say, buses and subways. One of the major things is that the project as originally, or the initial project did not make allowances or provide capacity for storage and staging of buses. Buses would still have to park overwhelmingly, predominantly on surface lots in the community, often have to go back to New Jersey during the day and come back at night. And then the intercity buses, which of course is a major theme of everything we've heard from this community board for years, were not accommodated in that original, at least we do have intercity buses on the terminal. This did not accommodate the ones that were picking up and dropping off on the streets. And the connection to the need for green space, of course, at a high level, and then the connection to some of the Hudson, the Hell's Kitchen South Coalition, I should say, that their plan and their goals to add green space in the community was another theme of what we heard next. So that brought us up to, we revised the project definition, and last month released the final scoping document, and we're moving forward with just one alternative, which is the build in place. The two that had elements west of 11th are no longer being considered. And like I said, that build in place has grown a lot and changed a lot since 17. It includes many of the asks of this community board and other stakeholders in the community and the elected officials on the west side. Next. So this is kind of where we are, and Glenn is gonna take you through most of this, but the new project is a broader project that will accommodate the intercity buses that currently pick up and drop off on the street, along with the ones that are already accommodated. There's a 40% increase in capacity for commuter and intercity buses overall, storage and staging in a separate facility, the ability to accommodate technology and autonomous vehicles when they come, and electric buses as they come online and as the carriers bring them into their fleet. Maintains the connections, because it's where the building's always been, maintains the connections to those 12 subway lines and the bus lines, adds 3 acres of green space, which you'll see, and Glenn will take you through that in a little more, 3.5, I should say, acres of green space south of the storage and staging facility, street facing retail, all on our property. We stuck with that criteria, and development opportunity, which again, Glenn will take you through in a little more detail. So I'm going to turn it over to Glenn Guzzi right now, who's going to take you through the rest. And you can go to the next slide.
The show that was muted. Thank you, Justin, and Christine and Dale. Thank you for having us. Christine, I'm going to ask that you be gentle with me, because Steve's watching, and it's added pressure. You understand, having Steve watching me give his presentation. So I'm going to ask for Steve's patience. Steve,
well,
say something.
The only direction I really gave you is don't upstage me, because they already have me as the last one. So you're not going to do that, I hope.
No, I'm going to try not, because, as Christine doesn't know, is we always debate who she likes best. So we'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for handling this. I'm sorry I got free of my other meeting earlier than I thought.
So just to run through very quickly and high level, the program elements and some of the detail. And I know that we'll have to have additional conversations as details become more available and as we progress through this process. So as you're familiar from last week, the main terminal in the existing footprint facing 8th Avenue on the north side of, looking at 42nd Street and the south side of 40th Street. So the existing footprint of the existing terminal in yellow, and then the storage and staging and intercity terminal west in the blue, as you see, and then the ramp structure, and how that will go through how that ramp structure will service the staging and storage, the intercity terminal and the main terminal. And then as Justin mentioned, the green space. We'll get into that a little bit further about the green space. That's actually, I think, a very exciting component of it. And it's one thing I'm really very excited about. So Janine, if you would please. So the main terminal. Today, as Justin went through, the antiquated aspects of the main terminal and its need, what we will be replacing with a new terminal will be 5 floors of bus gates, which would be more than 160 gates, a more efficient flow, a more efficient use of the space, so that the bus operations will be able to accommodate that future development. As Justin also said in our earlier process, and he indicated through our earlier processes, both from a commuter standpoint and from a community standpoint, the connection to the subway lines and the mass transit, the bus lines, is critically important. This building will maintain all of those connections so that commuters, when they arrive at the bus terminal, who need the subway or need a transit bus, New York City transit bus, will be able to access them directly without having to flood city streets as if the building were placed further west in some of the other components. We have on here fully ADA compliant. What I have said internally is, of course, it's going to be fully ADA compliant. But the thing that's also exciting about the main terminal, and as you've seen what some of the work that we've been doing at the airports and looking at the new terminals there, this building also will take on that feel, a very modern new approach, an open approach that has a very integrated aspect, both internally for the commuter and externally for the community. We've heard a lot of comments about the retail, that it's not all facing inside the building and that there will be retail on the outside of the building. This program will be able and allow us to do that. And again, as we said, best-in-class amenities. But best-in-class amenities also means the relationship of that building and the system here to the community, which we'll get into in just a moment. And then, of course, as Steve has talked about in previous meetings, futuristic engineering and artificial intelligence. We're very excited to be able to look to this building to be able to accommodate 100% an electric bus fleet and all of the elements that we'll be able to add into the project from a sustainability standpoint. A lot that we'll have to learn about as we go through the NEPA process. If we can go to the next, please. So the storage and staging facility, this building is actually very interesting because it is going to allow us to be able to develop the entire program in a way that is, I think, sensitive to community needs and commuter needs. At first, and we'll see this in a sequence, it will be used as a temporary terminal when it is complete. However, the goal of this building and what it will become is the staging and storage facility and the inner city terminal. There will be 4 floors that will house somewhere between 300 and 350 commuter buses. Today, as we know, and we've walked around the community with some of you, looked at those surface level lots, how they move from one lot into the system, into the ramp structure, and create congestion on the streets and just added traffic. This building, along with the ramps with direct access to and from the tunnel, will enable those buses to enter into the system without having to go on city streets really and circulate around as they're doing today. Additionally, there will be 2 floors with a total of 40 gates that will handle the inner city buses, the curbside operation, and that which exists in the main terminal today. So we're able to take in a good number, if not all. We have to look at, Christiana, we've had the conversation, what that actually means and what the needs are, but it's a huge improvement to be able to provide this in this building. And then again, as I mentioned previously, the ability to accommodate electric buses and other future technologies. If we can just please go to the next. Then new ramps. This is where I really don't have any worry about upstaging Steve, because it's very difficult to talk about ramps and make it exciting. But what I will say is one aspect, what we usually lump in with ramps, although it's not shown here, is a direct access into the lower level of the main terminal. Today, as we know, and Christine, I remember a long time ago, you myself, Michael Laver, we stood on the northeast corner of 40th and 9th, and we looked at that situation there. Today there's that big opening where buses travel from west to east and then enter into the south side of the building to access the lower level. In this plan, that totally goes away. There will not be an opening on 40th Street. There will be a direct access tunnel from the ramp structure, from the tunnel, the ramp structure that will go into the lower level of the terminal. So a nice aspect of that is that will eliminate the buses causing the congestion on 40th and 9th and that backup that we've seen that goes north on 9th Avenue. So it will help from the emission standpoint, and again, buses circulating on city streets. One thing we know we have to talk about, and it's very early for this, is how they will be treated, whether they're enclosed, how much they're enclosed. That's going to be an ongoing dialogue, and something we're very happy to have that dialogue to learn more of the thinking and what would make sense there. So if I tried to make it exciting, Christine, so I hope that worked. Next, please. So this is going to be a sequence of our thinking of the project. Before you hit go, Janine, if you can just give me one moment, you're going to see a sequencing of colors that's going to indicate items of the project coming online. And before we hit go, what I wanted to say is, I'll take you through that briefly, but this also shows early thinking. Steve and the more technical side of major capital projects have really done a tremendous amount of work trying to think through what really makes the most sense to be able to achieve this program in a way that makes sense for the community, from the ability to
Did we lose Glenn?
Yeah, I think he froze.
Well,
Okay, I'll
Steve
take
can
it from
take it.
there. So where we are, can you hear me?
great. Yes, tag team. I love it.
Okay, we'll tag team. So where we are now, what we took a look at is maintaining the operations and minimizing the impact to the community. Through this series of visuals, you'll see how we've staged it to accomplish that. So you could push the button now, Janine. The screen, Janine, oh, there you go. So there's the overbuild that you've talked about so much about. And we'll talk about that at the end. We'll go back to that. But basically building those ramps that interconnect directly into the Lincoln Tunnel, as well as a storage and staging facility, as well as an intercity, a full intercity operation, including the pickup and drop-offs that presently exists on the street. Once that goes operational as a temporary terminal, along with those two overbuilds, that'll enable us to build from the bottom up the facility, the new main terminal. And that'll be, once it's all complete, then it all ties together. It's all interlinked, and it all keeps, minimizes, if not eliminates, the buses on the streets and puts them in the ramps, directly into the ramps, into the storage and staging and intercity terminal, and interconnects into the main terminal. Now, for you, that gets the buses off the street. It also gets the intercity buses off the street. For the commuter, it increases certainty dramatically, because now you're storing a number of buses in the intercity terminal with the ability to deal with electric vehicles, as well as potentially autonomous vehicles in that facility, as well as the present on-street pickup and drop off, the mega buses and Bolt type buses. So, but if you look at the distance, you can actually see, the location of the bus relative to the passenger. So increasing the certainty and dramatically decreasing the amount of activity on the street. It becomes a self-contained entity facility. You also see some additional potential development that the community gave us a strong hand and strong guidance in looking at potential of, in this case, 4 towers that are based on our analysis of as of rights of what's allowed in that community relative to the property. It does not take any additional, it does not take any property. It's solely built on Port Authority property. So from left to right, that's Galvin Plaza. The middle is where the ramps are today, the storage and staging, and ultimately the bus terminal is where it is presently. Once it's all done, I want to pause and really accentuate the park area. Each one represents a major element, either the Great Lawn of Bryant Park or Gramercy Park, over 3 acres. We think it's going to be closer to 3.5. We'll see when we get it all said and done. But we'll be turning that back to you folks to provide you with what you've asked for a long time, a great green space that you'll be able to enjoy for going forward for a lifetime. So that's the staging that we have laid out. It has a lot of work to be done. The project has a lot of work to be done. I want to emphasize that this is not the end. This is the concept of a plan that is a compendium of all the asks that we got from commuters, but equally, if not more, than from residents. And this is a beginning. We're going to be talking to each other a tremendous amount more. Frankly, hand in glove kind of situation. And it's been a great experience with you folks. And we look forward to it intellectually and meaningful, because we're all, I want to say ugly New Yorkers, because I'm a Bronx boy, married a Queens girl. And I'm sure you folks have bleed New York blue. And we want to make this the very best legacy project that we can, working together, and we're off to a great start. I don't know if there's any more.
There's one more slide, Steve. Yeah.
I've returned.
Okay.
If we get one more slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
How am I doing, Glenn?
Well, I don't. Since
That was a nice trick. I got to learn that trick.
Since my Wi-Fi froze, maybe I think you probably hit the turn Glenn off button. So
there's no such button. So Glenn, outreach. You want to cover outreach? We're there for you. It kind of feeds into what I just said. We built a outreach office. It's housed. We're going to be talking to you. You have Ernest his number. You have his email address. You know where we all live. You have all our numbers. So we want to hear from you. We're excited. You guys really give us some great input, and we're looking forward to a great a journey together.
And the good news is they do know where Ernest lives, which is helpful.
So no, Dale, is that the end of it? I didn't.
End of it.
Yeah.
All right. So
Up for the
Dale
Q&A.
and Christine, I guess. Thank you, Janine. Great job. I can lay off my guy, Mike Donovan. Don't say that. He gets very sensitive. But you did a great job, Janine. All right, Dale, I'll turn it back to you and
Thank
Christine.
you.
I'm trying to find her on the picture, but thank you for the time.
Presentation is much appreciated. I would just like to say, and yeah, of course, Ernest is an alumnus of this committee, so we know how to reach him, and we've been very grateful before COVID that you accommodated our meeting in that space. I would love to get back to it sometime soon, as much as I like my bedroom. But we're going to go to committee members with questions, and then we'll open it up to the public. I just want to say really quickly that for those who are not aware, who are attending this meeting, this kind of flat snapshot of the Port Authority's progress on this project shows a great deal of listening and influence from this committee and from members of this board and from the, of course, the Hell's Kitchen South Coalition plan. You know, there was a community meeting a few years back where I got up and said the first order of business is, you know, I stole it from the Hippocratic Oath, I think, which was first, do no harm. And as you can see, there's no eminent domain. Eminent domain is off the table. And then secondly, we talked about rebuilding some of the, you know, reknitting some of the community fabric that's been, you know, unfortunately cut apart by the, you know, we are a very transit heavy community. And I think this goes towards that. And one of the central tenets of the, elements of the plan from Hell's Kitchen South Coalition was green space. And we see that this is a central part of this plan as well. And also, it's notable that this is what was a plan for one terminal is now a plan for 2 terminals, which I think is beneficial to all of us, as it does, everybody who knows this committee knows the struggles we've had with sidewalk, the use of our sidewalks, which are supposed to be for pedestrians, with bus company, operations. So we're very pleased to see it. And it also, I brought it up at the last meeting, it also brings a measure of redundancy and resilience to the plan, which I think is critical.
Right.
So I have a quick question, and then I'm going to open up to my colleagues. I know that a lot of the intercity buses are double deckers. So is it the idea, is it the conception with this plan that all of the both terminals operations would accommodate those larger buses?
Yes, we're accommodating double deckers, yes, throughout.
Throughout.
So raising the height of the ceiling, yes.
Okay, great. And do I see hands up? Do we have any questions? I do see hands up. Do I see them in the order they were raised? Or can I just start going? I'll just go across. David, Warren.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Also, we remember Ernest fondly. He was a co-chair and very involved in our community. My questions are, I was reading the report today, roughly, and if you can elaborate on 5.111 and also 616, and that is specifically what I'm worried about is Dyer Avenue between 34th and 35th Street. What's going to happen during the staging area in terms of air quality control while they're doing the construction, and the bus is going to park there? And then obviously I think there's going to be a park there, which we're all happy about. But prior to the park coming in, could you go into detail about the staging area of the building of the park? And also, could you elaborate on the curbside plan during the transition period? And my other question is also, and I don't know if this is going to pertain to when it's completed or while it's under construction, is indoor bike parking and extensive city bike racks.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you. All right, you asked about 5 questions. Let me see if I can get them. Guys, jump in, whoever wants to add more detail on my side. On the indoor bike, we will be looking at that. We understand that's, the world has changed. We went through that at World Trade, and we made accommodations. But we'd like to hear from you. Again, this is a beginning, so we haven't got to that detail yet. We'd like to hear from you folks as to what you're thinking. How could we accommodate that? The second one was on what's going to happen with the curbside buses during construction. They're probably going to stay where they are for that period of time, to be honest. We'll look if we can accommodate them, but presently we haven't really thought that far out. The plan would be, the focus of our plan right now is to try and maintain operations within the existing facility, and ultimately as we build if you follow the red, blue, yellow, the yellow would accommodate as it is now as we rebuild the ramps and start to build the new ramps with the staging area. Once that goes operational, we think we need those 2 deck overs. We definitely need the 2 deck overs, at least, to handle the additional capacity of the buses that are coming out of the terminal. The positive of that plan is it enables us. Originally, I was looking at, when I started this thing, I came up with working with my staff, a top-down construction, but that would have been too disruptive, because if you think about the whole operation trying to do it, people walking around the streets, it just was too tedious. So we went back to the drawing board. We liked the concept. Everything worked with build in place. It just didn't, the constructability didn't work as well. So we pulled back and rethought it through. We came up with this way of converting the storage and staging to a temporary facility. And as Dale said, it also excited the operations people because God forbid, there's always something could happen. You have the ability to swing your operation over to the storage and staging. I'm kind of going far abreast, but I'm kind of trying to tie all the pieces together. So
if you want me to jump in on the operations, I'm
no,
here.
I'm good. I'm good. I think I've been listening to you long enough, but I want you to add more to the details of what I'm talking about. On 34th, 35th, there's regulations relative to smoke and diesel fuel. I mean, as far as that goes, I mean, as far as during construction, there's special filters now that are equipped on the equipment to minimize any effluent from that. So we comply with that. I have to check if anything's changed since then. If there's anything else we could do, we'll take a look at that. And I apologize, I don't have the book here, but I don't want to delay you folks into looking up 5.1.1.1. Do you want to ask the question, David, or you want to?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I was also concerned about is the congestion. Will there be someone to monitor that? In other words, traffic congestion with pedestrians walking on the sidewalk, and basically just the air, our air quality while this is all happening.
Well, we're gonna do there's a whole part, and I'll let other people smarter than me talk about it, but there'll be a whole analysis on the air quality, which we'll look at as far as safety and congestion. Obviously, we have a need. We're in line with you. We have a need to move the people, move the buses, move the facility, keep it moving. So we'll have a series of people, and some of the company, I'm not saying that's the company, but right now we've engaged, at least in the initial phase, has been a strong ingredient. Remember, Sam Schwartz organization. Sam and I have been working together for 25 years, and despite I tease him because as we get older together, he's still thinking like a fresh thinker. He's never in the box other than cross through the box. So we're going to need that kind of thinking, and you'll give him an impossible challenge as I will, and he'll go through that and come up with some great ideas that we can embrace. Catherine, Kate, do you want to add something on the ops side?
Sure. I would just say that I wanted to clarify, because when you said curbside, that to me is two different things. One is the curbside buses that we will be accommodating as part of the program, the kind of the bolts and the megas. And during construction, we're not planning on taking those buses into kind of the temporary terminal. The plan would be to accommodate those in the new bus terminal, not during construction. But the second part of that is often the comment curbside operations will come up when you're talking about how we are accommodating the construction phase. And what we've done here is plan out the basic building blocks with the number of gates that we need to avoid having any kind of commuter operations on the street. Our goal here is to take the buses off, put them in the temporary terminal or on the Dyer deckovers. They're kind of off the street so that we can manage interim operations at those gates. In terms of what is going to go where, that that's part of the, I think, process going forward in terms of working with the carriers, seeing what their schedules are, seeing what is the most efficient way for us to set up those temporary operations. And we also have some time to do it because we'll be building that first facility, and we won't be knocking down the current bus terminal for a number of years. So we have time to work on that and work out what works best for kind of all the stakeholders. And I do want to point out that we are very much aware of the fact that many of the commuters are headed to 7th and 8th Avenue subway, and that we need to look and work collaboratively with the community on how we safely and efficiently move people from the terminal to their new temporary gate location. And that's something that we have to work on as the project progresses.
Thank you, Kate.
Steve, I'd like to add something
Please, Glenn.
to David's question in terms of air quality and the general issue of air quality staging and the sequencing and whatnot. So we have not begun yet the NEPA process, which will be an EIS, environmental impact statement. When that process begins, there's a multiple kind of tier of what I'm going to discuss with you. Is we'll spend 24 months in an environmental review where there will be a technical advisory committee and a stakeholder advisory committee. It's very prescriptive under the federal guidelines on how they operate within that process, so that there is a constant interaction between us in that process and the external world, whether it's a technical, like an engineering firm or community board or elected officials or a community organization. So there's going to be a process that is included in that automatically. But once that process is done, that doesn't mean we're done having that conversation. One thing that we did, and Steve alluded to earlier, one thing we did at the World Trade Center, which lessons learned proved to be very successful for us in an efficient way to manage quality of life issues, which is what we're really talking about, is you have to live with this. So we established a construction logistics office. You saw the image of our outreach office. It's our vision that will evolve into a fully functioning construction logistics office. You know, Steve had mentioned how we have Sam Schwartz downtown, who's still working with our logistics folks. So what that does is it enables us to be able to do look aheads, a month look ahead. What is happening in the horizon that we need to think about? What also bringing people from the outside in, whether it is the community board representatives or its elected officials, whomever they are, or business owners, so that we'd be able to have coordination meetings to discuss, okay, here's what you can expect in the future. And then we would also say, okay, what happened in the past? You had some questions, what was resolved, what wasn't resolved, and why? So that we'd be able to have that kind of interaction through the beginning of the actual construction would be set up beforehand through the end of that process, that construction process. So we can talk together about, okay, what's working? Did this idea work or not? Why didn't it work? And what is it that we can do differently to minimize impacts, to figure out the best way forward? I mean, some things will be trial and error because everything's always new, but the fact that we keep together in that sort of logistics framework, I think will help to go a long way to resolve these issues and really to deal with some of the environmental issues, whether it's dust or air quality and the whatnot. We know air quality is an issue. That's something we won't be shying away from and having that conversation. So I think that would go or be very helpful.
Thank you, Glenn. That was excellent. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Dale, I'll look to you. You're the moderator, I presume.
Yeah, we're going to go next to Jeffrey and Brett, but I just want to mention one thing. Thank you, David, for bringing up bike parking, because I think as pertains to intermodal, I think with this committee is going to stand firm that this facility, this complex of facilities needs to be intermodal in its arteries and veins. And that means pedestrian, bike, scooter, rideshare vehicles, private cars, train connections. There's a ferry terminal in our district. So a truly intermodal concept from beginning to end.
I think that kind of touches, I mean, and not to digress, but it's kind of interesting. I mean, most people would like grimace at what you just said, but we haven't thought about what's going to happen 10 or 20 years from now. So, you know, all these young people are coming with even more ideas that we're going to have to accommodate or at least do not preclude. You know, it depends on where we are in the continuum of time. Like we're starting with diesels, going to hybrids, going to electric, going to articulated, and then what? You know, I'm being facetious, but my point is every one of these things, you know, look at what I see down in Lower Manhattan, people riding around with scooters and whatever. So yeah, the answer is yes, but we have to kind of put it all together and try and get it all to fit into the package.
And then we can talk about the hovercrafts.
Yeah, well,
I want to buy one.
I know
All right,
exactly what you just said too.
Thank you, Dale. And Stephen, appreciate the consideration for figuring out how we can make everything work. A couple of quick punch questions, and then I think a longer one. Any sense of a timeline here? I know you laid that out in the beginning. We've got a ULURP to go to. EIS has a timeline, but if everything goes according to plan with your community input happening now, I see Christine laughing. If everything goes according to plan, when will construction begin on sort of phase 1?
I hesitate throwing out a date. Could we talk about that in the future? But we have some thoughts. I just got to get, there's a number of other people in this, like we're just meeting with the FDA now. I want a sense of their time frame. And then, do you have to finish it? And listen, this process could go faster than we think, or take the time it takes,
Well, here's the thing. I'm on the planning council for the Empire Station complex, just south of this, right? And that project isn't to be realized for 2030. And it's annoying to me because that facility, some would argue Penn Station is maybe even worse than the Port Authority. So I guess I want some hope here is what I'm looking for. I mean, are we talking 3 to 6 or like 10 plus from
to start construction?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say in the first, the former, not the latter.
Okay. 3 to 6. All right. Okay.
Glenn, did I go okay with that, Glenn?
The lawyers are getting hysterical.
I know. I make lawyers hysterical, so that's okay.
You get engineers in trouble.
This way. Let's answer it this way. 24 months, thereabout, for a NEPA process. Maybe we can do it in a little more constrained time frame. We still have ULURP. Obviously part of it overlaps. So if we stick with the 24-month idea, maybe another 3 or 4 months beyond for ULURP. And we have to, you'll know before anything happens when the notice of intent is going to go into the Federal Register. I can assure you it will not be in the coming days. So we have some time on that. So the important thing is, once you have that environmental complete, whether it's NEPA or ULURP, presumably you're doing all of the work in advance to figure out who's going to be your contractors, all the design and the engineering and whatnot. So you never want a project to just sit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. So, you're looking at maybe a 30-month environmental period, okay, all inclusive. So I would say, sometime thereafter, we would have a logistics group set up before that happens, before we start the work, because we'll want to bring everyone in and say, okay, we think we're going to break ground on this day and, come look at it or whatever, so there's a lot, to Steve's point, that still really needs to be coordinated. Justin Bernbach made a statement earlier. If we had a lot of specific questions, that may not be so good because it means so much would be baked. And sometimes the most honest thing we can do is just, be honest and say, we don't really know precisely. And that's something we're all going to have to work on together. But that kind of gives you.
I think that the thing I want to emphasize what Glenn said, and I want to emphasize, while we're talking, the NEPA process is going along, as well as looking at further design, further design information, right? And, the logistics, as Glenn pointed out, and then a procurement process will begin. So it's not like you take every piece and just put it one after the other. It'll be going concurrently to some extent, so.
Thank you for that. I guess my other couple of main points are, as it relates, I'm not sure if we'll discover it in the ULURP or not, but, with the way that the spread of properties happen, my preference, of course, would be for there to be a consolidation of the intercity and the commuter bus terminal to be in one, because I'm very worried about all those bridges making our streets even darker in that area than they already are. It's really, it's sort of the way that it encompasses that swath of 3 avenues is pretty significant from a streetscape experience as a pedestrian, and air and light. And given the capacity, what I expect to be pretty significant towers, of which you will hear no objection from me about those, this needs to be paid for. I worry about the pedestrian experience. And so I flipped that by saying, where will we be able to opine and determine about sidewalk widening? We know how wide the sidewalks are today, and oftentimes developers say to us, well, the sidewalks, we have a building line and the road line, but I'm not sure why we don't push building lines in a little bit further to widen the sidewalk if the city doesn't allow us to just go into the streets. So I wonder how the port, like where the opportunity will come in for us to talk about sidewalk widening in both the interim and then as the project becomes permanent, given this, I'm sure there'll be a 10th Avenue exit to the intercity building. And so that's going to be a lot of people on sidewalks that aren't built for that capacity.
Glenn, you want to take that one, or you want me to?
No, that's fine. Back to the environmental process as the early part of your question. So again, a technical advisory committee and stakeholder advisory committee as part of the process where we'll be having everyone together to really talk about those issues and to delve deeply into them. Last week, we had the question on streetscape, what we do know we need to do, and we're not there yet, and that we have to have a point of departure for a conversation to be effective. So we need to come back with different viewpoints. Say from the north, we have imagery, looking from the south to the north. We heard that, we want to see it from different angles, different directions. We have to do that. We have to get in, we have to kind of like zoom in now a little bit further to really take a look at, okay, what is the environment, say at the staging and storage facility as it relates to the street life, as it relates to the sidewalk widths, as it relates to being able to incorporate a tree system, street trees, and what does that environment feel like? What's the texture of the building, and how does that breathe with the community? To your point, you said air and light and whatnot. What are some of the necessary components? So that's going to be an ongoing process through that environmental review. That is something that we must do. It's required by NEPA. It's a federal requirement, but we would do that anyway because that's going to help us create a project that's successful, that is able to be, accepted into a community. The other thing in terms of the ability to have conversation is beyond NEPA, we're still going to be through ULURP. That is a very collaborative process as well. So that's kind of like the early stage of what would happen. But then as we delve deeper in and we can look at, how are we going to mitigate something? Could we kind of eke out a little space here? Could we do something there? That's kind to be I would say the life of the project as we move forward, where we can make some modifications here and there.
And then I guess just finally, there couldn't be a proper EIS issued without understanding what the height of the buildings are going to be that are developed. And I don't want to get into a land use discussion because that's out of the scope of this committee, but I just want to understand how that will fit into the EIS and ULURP process.
So Jeffrey, to that question, as we mentioned earlier, the development there will be as of right, which means we won't be looking to add on additional air rights and development rights. So we would need to stay within New York City zoning for those lots. So
technically, we often think of ULURP as dictating a rezoning, but really we're going through ULURP to inform the process for a new terminal and as of right development, just to make sure that the community is involved in that process along the way, right?
Correct. And like, for instance, I had mentioned earlier, part of the scoping document, an element of the project being the underpass under 9th Avenue. So technically that's a change in the land use map. So that element would have to be incorporated into ULURP. We have not begun. We're not there yet to do that.
Sure.
We have to take stock, coordinate with the city at the appropriate time to even create the application, which has not happened. So we have to look at, for instance, if there's like a cantilever or an abutment or some and all of the elements that goes into it. We have a guy on with us. His name is Michael Kraft. He's immensely creative and talented, who's going through a lot of that now to get our thinking. And that's a conversation that will continue.
Thank you very much. Sure.
Hey, Katie, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that, Jeffrey, you mentioned something about access on 10th Avenue. And I just want to clarify that the basic plan in terms of the flow of buses, and hopefully you'll be able to follow me without a graphic, is that buses that are coming in and out of the tunnel will be going under kind of the future deck over area and will be staying on Dyer Avenue and will enter the terminal through off of Dyer Avenue, and then we'll go underneath the storage and staging building to the ramp structure. We're eliminating the entrances on 40th and 41st Street by putting in the 9th Avenue underpass. So right now we are eliminating the street entrances and exits for the bus and keeping the buses kind of confined to a direct ramp and Dyer kind of corridor from the tunnel to the building. Now you mentioned 10th Avenue. I'm not sure.
Sorry, Catherine, that was really helpful information. I was thinking about the pedestrian experience for entering and exiting the terminal as a bus passenger.
Okay.
Which I'm guessing the buildings will be very porous for entry and exit purposes on all sides, basically, right?
Yes. And there are also, I wasn't sure, I mean, there are, we're planning in development too. So the development towers would have their own entrances.
Right.
But I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were referring to. Okay.
That's helpful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kat.
That's all, Jeff?
That's it for tonight. Round.
Okay, all right. Yeah.
To Jeffrey's questions about the tower, was there some initial concept about the use of those towers? Was it commercial, hotel?
It's right now, as best we can tell, based on our analysis, and we need to run it by the city and yourselves, is a mixed use between residential and commercial. But we also have to talk to the developers too and see where the market is at the time we move forward.
Gotcha. So it's up in the air. All right.
Yeah. So
But it's going to be
I would
with-
say a positive. It's flexible right now, somewhat flexible. Go ahead,
All right.
Tom. Sorry.
I'm going to read one question from the chat, and then I'll go to Brett. I think it was Martin. It was a question about accessibility to at the point of the bus ramps, at the point of the entrances, at bus entrances. Was that your question, Martin?
Yeah. Right now, it's very difficult to board a bus. What do you see in improving the situation?
For wheelchair users and scooter
Yeah.
users.
Okay, I mean, I'll let the experts talk more specifically, but generally speaking, and we actually, I'm proud of this. There's obviously, I'm not even going to take credit for it. You meet code, right? You start there. But we actually have a group within the Port Authority who are people who are challenged and have special needs. And what I did with them is we took them around a tour of our facility, and they gave us guidance, and it was very heartfelt in the sense of they have to, it's actually code, but you have to push a button and a person has to come over and help open the door. Well, that meets code, but they said it's very uncomfortable waiting. So what we did is we went and pushed activation buttons on not just one door, but multiple doors. So that's something we would like input from, the experience, from the things that you're the expert. What have you learned? What do you find? Okay, the code says certain things, but there's also subtleties the code can't pick up, and we'd love to have your input, sir.
Yeah, more elevator.
Definitely more elevators.
Yeah.
The new terminal will be designed to be fully ADA compliant at all the gates and with much better elevator access. Unfortunately, the way in which the building was expanded over the years, it's very difficult to navigate, and many of them are not accessible.
I mean, Martin, some of our islands now, I mean, you know how tight they are. I mean, I don't know. Person in a wheelchair, I don't know how they have to be very selective about what platforms. We're looking at something in the neighborhood of 32 feet wide. Am I correct, Kate? Right? And so-
All of the new gates will be designed to be accessible. Now there are some of the gates that just can't be. So in that case, riders have to call in advance, and the bus has to go to a different gate, which is wheelchair accessible, which really isn't, that obviously is not acceptable for a state-of-the-art terminal. So the new terminal will have every single gate will be accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
I think we're soon going to know the difference between a retrofit compliant building and a purpose-built compliant building. Brett.
You're on mute.
You're still on mute, Brett.
Oh, okay, that's better.
Yep.
All right, great. So it's really great to see the project's moving. It's going to increase capacity for mass transit, which we're big supporters of course, and of course will alleviate a lot of the quality of life issues that we're dealing with buses on our streets. But as I think we can all assume, the demand for mass transit always seems to exceed the capacity. And our neighborhood really does seem to take on the bulk of the city's gateway functions. We have the Lincoln Tunnel, the bus terminal. We're bordering right on Penn Station. We got Moynihan Station under construction. Is the Port Authority looking long-term to building additional capacity in the city somewhere outside of our neighborhood? Like say near Atlantic Yards, where they also have similar good transit connections, and also in an area that's going to be better connected to a route that's going to head northeast, like the destinations like Boston and in Montreal? Or is this the only capital project for buses that the Port Authority is looking at long term?
Want me to take that? Do you want to take that, Steve?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, first of all, I mean, Kate, you're probably more informed than I am, but I know there's thoughts of increasing the to utilizing the existing capacity in the George Washington Bridge terminal, right? I mean, there's some looking at reconfiguring that situation. We're also looking at other modes of transportation. I mean, you're talking 10, 20 years from now, as Dale made a comment. I mean, there's a lot of modes, and we're just trying to keep up because these projects are so sophisticated. They take a period of time, and by the time you design them, they're out of date. So you have to really, it's going to be a new challenge for us as a people. And I'm not just saying us on the Port Authority side, but your side, to kind of forecast what the future is going to bring, light rail, all those type of things. So we're really, we are looking at everything. We have actually an active planning group that does that. They look beyond, we're looking 2030, 2040, 2050, but they're looking even beyond. What's the next mode going to be? I mean, we're actually engaging, on this project and many of the projects, the artificial intelligence people who trying to project, not just using, it's not, when I was young, it was, much younger, it was all steel and concrete, if I could digress for a minute. It was all make it bigger, make it stronger, make it more capable of handling just more space. And now we're looking at, I don't mean to digress, and Kate could do a much better job than I can, but something called platooning. What does that mean? Basically squeezing the inefficiencies, the uncertainty about buses by putting it into artificial intelligence over the next 10 years or so. And I don't want to predict when that'll come, but it's already happening. So we're starting to do some testing in the field, not on our properties, but in parking lots and things of artificial intelligence and how you could platoon vehicles through, get them there just in time, move them to the position, pick up the passengers, get out. And it's not that dwell time, the guy hanging around, running his air conditioning, parked on the side of the street, all that disappears. And we're trying to squeeze as much as we can out of the efficiency of that operation, but all our operations. And I know, Justin, there's some planning work going. Maybe you want to add to
Yeah,
that.
so
Well,
I think, Steve, like you were mainly referring to efficiencies within the current kind of corridor, but what we're looking at, and some of the people, I know Christine's familiar with this, and going back to, I'd say 2017, the city asked us to undertake a study, because what you just said, Brett, was like, by the time, we don't know obviously exactly what the needs are going to be in 2040, but we also know that, it's already 2021, and we want to be able to move forward with other, filling other needs beyond 2040. So to that end, there is a study being undertaken right now by our planning group in consultation with city planning and other transportation agencies that's going to look at those sorts of things. And crucially, to your point, I think to your point, if I heard it right, if we believe that the growth or the need in Manhattan is going to be not so much at 42nd Street, but in the 50s or something, that maybe there or in the 20s, that there are ways to link up New Jersey with the parts of Manhattan that may be underserved, or maybe the areas for growth in the future. That's what that planning study is looking at, and the timing of that's going to kind of follow close on the heels of this EIS process getting underway. So in the next year or so, but that's exactly what we're looking at, is how do you enhance Trans-Hudson capacity beyond 2040, and how do you do it in a way that not everything's going to this 42nd Street corridor? Did that answer your question?
Brett, okay.
He's on mute.
Yeah.
I think
It's breaking up.
the transit seems very Manhattan focused, whereas Brooklyn has been, I think, the faster growing borough, and just wondering how to.
Brett, I think it's because of the purview of Port Authority as a bi-state agency.
Yeah, I mean, we are working with our transportation partners, but you're right, Dale's right. I mean, we are a Trans-Hudson agency. We link New York to New Jersey, but we have been talking to the MTA, New Jersey Transit, about where the growth is going to be, where the needs going to be in the future.
And city planning.
On that
city
note,
planning, city planning is a partner on the study.
About the GWB terminal, I mean, the authority recognizes it's got, I mean, I assume there are capacity issues or potential capacity issues up there, but it is recognized as a kind of, for its architectural signification, I would.
Yeah, and that, as you might know, also that terminal was just reopened in, I think, again, I want to say 17, newly remodeled, and has spare capacity and is part of the long-term
capacity.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does.
Kate, maybe Kate, you want to spend a minute on that?
Yeah, it's more about where people want to go, and they all want to go to Midtown. So they just don't have the demand. The gates are there, but the demand is not there for people to go to that.
Our next sidewalk application.
Yes.
We're sending them to an architecturally significant terminal in New York City, in Manhattan. All right. I had a couple more questions, and then Christine's going to take hers. Do you anticipate that the park, which is built, it's a plinth essentially, that it's two plinths, will that be at street level?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And when you walk on, you look like you're walking onto a park off of the sidewalk.
Gotcha. All right. And I think the other question we already addressed. So Christine, I'll turn it over.
In fact, follow up to that question, Dale, is the platform would be such that we can plant big trees on that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The big tree platform. That's the name.
I know. Listen, if anybody knows about big trees, I planted 444 trees at the World Trade Center, and they were about
on the platform.
They were 10 years old on a platform.
Wow.
And they were heavy. Each tree was 20,000 pounds.
Fabulous. So I had a little. I mean, my concern about air quality. I'm not going to repeat it, but And I mentioned the other day the accommodation with the hydrogen buses. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I have that from the last
Right.
year.
And then I have a question about the long distance terminal. Is that the blue one? Blue?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, the blue terminal, we're going to call them like that. So what is the flexibility? Is there an opportunity if there is parking and there are gates? Is it somewhat interchangeable or not at all? I mean, if there are, obviously, if there are need for parking, they can use a gate. But what about the reverse?
So I think the answer is it's designed the way I described it, but it probably, knowing the operations people, because they were very excited about this, I think it's interchangeable. Kate, I'll hand it off to you on that.
You mean so the storage and staging
Right
building,
now, there's 4 levels of storage and staging and 2
Yeah, what I'm-
levels of intercity.
what I'm
If
saying
you
is
want,
that-
you need it to have a swing space both
Right.
between the two.
What I'm suggesting is that if there is eventually the demand for parking shrinks and the demand for gates expands, can you reuse the parking space to become long distance gates?
it would have to be retrofit, but yes, because what the levels that are built out with gates will have accommodations, will have ADA access to the gates, seating, restaurant, all of the accommodations that you would expect to see. Whereas the storage and staging levels will be completely open so that the buses can be packed in and just stored in like what we call a racetrack formation to fit as many buses in there as you can fit.
Got it.
So,
Got it.
but it'll be a blank slate so that in the future, if we needed to, we could retrofit it, and it would work because the gates are at the top. We would already have kind of the core of the elevators. We would have to be working around the core of the elevators anyway. So I think it could be done.
So related to that, I had a question about whether people could enter on 10th Avenue. They want to go to the commuter terminal, but they work on Hudson Yard. Can they enter on 10th Avenue and go to the commuter terminal?
I don't think that we've thought through those details, but I think we would want to have as many. We're looking at.
Because I can see a benefit.
Yeah, I know what you're asking. I have to ask Michael Kraft.
Right.
I know there was some, obviously there's a connection to get to intercity. You're asking, is intercity connected? Could someone walk from intercity to the commuter spots?
Or even from the, not from the ramps, because obviously you don't want to get into the ramps, but yes, from one to the other, because
Right.
if it's raining or it's cold or whatever, I'm sure people are going to be happy to use that rather than walking in the streets. So that's
We're
my
on 39th, but I think that we're going to be looking to activate as much of that retail and frontage as we can.
No, I understand that. I'm talking about
Mhm.
inside the terminal.
No, she's saying yeah, we could take a look. Let me take a.
We
let
can
us
take a look at that.
Right.
Oh, Michael, you're here. Okay.
I'm here. We can take a look at that. There is a connection for pedestrians to connect between the intercity terminal and the main facility, with entrances throughout 8th Avenue and 9th Avenue, including on the west side of 9th Avenue. We're still looking at the opportunities for entrances west of 9th.
Okay.
And I think there'll be an opportunity for that.
Thank you, Michael. I thought that was the case, but I wasn't going to do it without you being here.
You did a much better job at answering that question then.
I'm sorry, Kate. That was unfair. I should have directed it to Mike. I didn't know he was in the audience.
So
Nope.
big concern we have with all the new construction in the city right now in our district are, where are the commercial deliveries taking place? Where is the trash disposal taking place for each of the building? And I'm talking about each of the terminal. I mean, you're going to have retail space, right?
Yep.
So that calls for that on both terminal. And indeed, when you do your towers, I mean, these are issues we would like to hear addressed. and maybe there are some shared spaces that you want to have with the buildings to do the trash and the deliveries. So everything is not on the street. And so these are things we'd like to put in your mind and say, look, you have to think about it, and where are you going to put them? We certainly don't want to have piles of garbage on the street. And we don't want to have the big Diet Coke, the Coca-Cola truck, as it is today on 41st Street every day, triple parked, and trying to upload. And then this is the Budweiser truck, and then there is that other truck, and then the next truck. I mean, they all have their own truck. And we see that happening as we are talking about having more retail on both building on the ground floor. I think we need to plan for that.
All right, Michael, I haven't actually asked you that question, but I probably should have, my bad. But Michael, if you could make a note of that, and let's take a look at that.
And I think there is a good
You're looking for controlled, and I'm sorry, Christine, you're looking for controlled environment for pickup and drop off of garbage and deliveries. And
completely, yeah. And I have a off question. So you are saying and we absolutely are delighted that you are doing that the bus are going to go under 9th Avenue, so they don't have to be on 9th Avenue. And absolutely, we are very, very grateful for that. So now I'm asking, normally when the bus leave, they go under 9th Avenue and they emerge on Dyer. Are you going to close this thing, or is that where are those buses going to emerge?
Kate, you know better than me, but I thought it was still operational, right?
It's still Dyer Avenue. Right now we have the Greyhound Tunnel, but that is very narrow. So we will have capacity to go in and out.
So they will not. So that tunnel, not the tunnel.
That will stay. You're asking, will it stay open? It's very simple.
Right. The exit. Are you going to remove that exit? Because essentially you are going to.
So you want what you're asking? If the bus is leaving, come off at Dyer, and the bus is coming in, come off at Dyer. Will you see the?
I'm not asking that. I'm asking whether, since they are leaving 9th Avenue, right under 9th Avenue, and they are leaving to get to the tunnel, they have to get to a level which is at the ramps, right? How do they get from the street, that level, to the ramp? And Michael is smiling. Obviously, he has spent some time on that.
No, they're two separate systems. The underground tunnels go to the lower level.
I know, but when they exit, where do they go?
Back to Dyer.
And from Dyer, how do they get to the tunnel?
Just like the Greyhound Tunnel now.
Oh, the same way. That exit remains the same way.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yeah, because I had a related question about straightening 41st Street, but then that doesn't work. Okay. Will the building, the stores be facing the? Will there be store around the long distance terminal and parking?
We're looking at that. Michael, you want to just, I got to be careful. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, if I could pause, but the intent was, Michael, to do that, right?
Yeah, we're looking at every opportunity on the staging and storage and ramp parcels as well. So we're still looking at the viability for all of those locations.
Right. And
we'll maximize it.
And we love those teeny tiny stores, not those huge stores, which nobody can rent. And okay. So the driver's facilities, where is that going to be?
I'm sorry, where? What'd you ask?
The drivers, where do they go and, relax, get a massage, the whole thing?
Well, I think, again, that's a detail, and I apologize for not trying to, but my idea was to provide a space and the area where they store and stage. Is that, Michael? I don't know if you've gotten anywhere near that detail.
Yeah, that's not programmed, but that's the idea, Steve. It would be in that building, although there's the ability to connect between the terminals.
Right.
Um,
And you have the roof, right? So,
and there's a roof level.
and there's
Yes.
a huge roof. Okay.
Hmm.
All right, these were my questions.
Great, thanks,
Thank
Christine.
you so much.
Viren,
No
one of
problem.
our
Thank you, Christine. Thank
one
you
of
so-
our committee members posted a question about the bridges across the avenues, and he's asking about whether they're open or solid. And I understand, just to tag on to the earlier conversation about pedestrian wayfaring through the complex, I understand that those bridges are going to be largely bus ramps, but they're also at some point going to have, in some portion, going to have a pedestrian function, I assume, right? If there's going to be connectivity between the complex. So I think it would be nice to have those bridges, feel like a pedestrian bridge experience across our avenues. And that might go to kind of lightening the feel of that bulk across the avenue.
Okay.
At least on one side.
Yeah, at least in parts.
Right, right.
Maybe it's not I know we're looking at a block diagram, a massing scheme, but maybe they're not as massive as they appear to be in the diagram, and singular and massive as they appear to be in the diagram. Do we have any more questions from committee members? If not, we'll open it to the public. Going once? Okay. I'm going to start with two questions that were posted. I know we talked about, Rob, do you have a question? Is that Rob with his hand up on the phone?
Hey, Rob. Sorry, Dale. Yeah, I had to unmute twice. Okay, quick question. Are they still going to continue to have a parking garage on the top of the roof?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm going to address this question that's in the Q&A. I know we talked a little bit about the towers, the proposed or future towers, and you said they're as of right. What does as of right mean in terms of height over the current terminal? Are they 40-story towers? Just to ballpark it, are they 40-story towers? Are they 60-story towers?
They vary, Dale. So depending on block to block, based on New York City zoning guidelines. So they're what that means in terms of the as of right, they won't exceed zoning. They can't. We're not doing that. We're going to stay strictly within the zoning guidelines.
No, I get that. I'm just asking you to ballpark it for me on the two towers, the one nearest 8th and the one east of 9th.
So the one on the 42nd and 8th, that would be the tallest tower. And that is, Steve, that's the number I'm going to need help with. We're somewhere in that range of 60, thereabouts.
It might be a little taller than
A little
that.
taller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say 70 or so, 70 to 80 in that range. But again, you're asking ballpark. That's
yeah. I'm not holding anyone to any height. I just want a ballpark concept. And then, or this Sophia from our community would like a ballpark concept. And then the one nearest, closer to 9th.
I think that's in the 40 range, maybe. Michael, are you nodding? Michael Kraft, 40 range.
Okay, perfect.
I think. I mean, you're cold. I'm doing this cold, but.
You have another question, Dale, here.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So Dale, before you go, Michael Kraft, you're unmuted. Can you give just the approximate range of the floors? I know that you have that information.
So
approximate ranges.
Right, on 9th Avenue, 40 to 50. The zoning all depends on the use. So if there are credits for subway access or plaza, and so that makes the allowable vary. So as Steve said, on 9th Avenue, between 40 and 50 floors potentially. On 8th Avenue, between 70 and 80 plus, depending on what we do at the street, and the light and air at the street would allow the building to be a little taller. On 11th Avenue, about 70 to 80 floors.
If we can pause,
And
again,
yeah.
that's what's allowable. Doesn't mean.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
These
by the
are
way,
envelopes.
that's a calculation, as you well know, based on our knowledge, yet to be determined and reviewed with the city.
Again, we're just looking for ballpark concepts,
Yeah,
not
no,
like, yeah.
no, I'm just answering your question as best we can.
These are maximum heights.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then
there was a comment here on from Michael Guaracci, which says the northwest corner of Dyer and West 40 doesn't have an accessible.
Christine, I think Michael's questions are better suited to the next presentation.
Right.
aren't they?
Okay.
Yeah, and then
I brought over Brian, Eric, and Miriam, so they had questions.
okay, great. Brian?
Hi all,
Brian,
thank you, Dale. Thanks.
Sure.
I am a public member on the Land Use Committee, so I saw this presentation last week, and I've also been working with Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood, Hell's Kitchen South Coalition on the plan. So I have a whole bunch of questions, but I'll just call up Christine tomorrow and bother her with them. But two things. One is, have you selected or what is the process involved with selecting a designer? I'm assuming that's coming down the road. And who will that be, and what does the selection process entail? And the other thing is, you spoke of knitting the neighborhood back together, which I think is language that came from the Hell's Kitchen South Coalition plan.
Yep.
And a big part of our plan was extending the green space further down Dyer Avenue and potentially decking over or greening spaces on Dyer that extends all the way down to 33rd Street. The second part of knitting the neighborhood back together is not creating a mass that obstructs the neighborhood from being connected. And again, you know, and I think Dale pointed this out and Jeffrey pointed this out, we're looking at a massing diagram, but currently in that massing diagram, ramp systems and buildings cover 2 streets and 2 avenues. And those become barriers to pedestrians. No one likes walking on 9th Avenue underneath the current structure. So how is the Port Authority going to view knitting this neighborhood back together in the current plans, and what considerations are being given to those ramp structures to encourage pedestrians from walking beneath them, and encouraging movement on the street through the West 30s. And then one last thing on Dyer Avenue, spoke about 34th and 35th, and we've seen your plans on 38th and 37th. What is happening at 36th and Dyer? Because currently that is an exit for the Lincoln Tunnel that goes across 36th and across Midtown. I just want to make sure that in the whole staging process that consideration is given to the community that lives in the West 30s, and we don't become a parking lot, so to speak. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay,
Brian.
so let me answer your first question, which who's the designers? There's Cohn, Pedersen, and Fox is the architect working with Michael and supporting his efforts, correct, Mike?
Correct.
Okay, and WSP, formerly Parsons Brinckerhoff with a joint venture, Thornton Tomasetti, very creative firm. They're all supporting the NEPA process. Further than that, we haven't decided. We still need to analyze with a full 360, whether we go, everything's on the table. I mean, we go conventional, most likely at least go design build, and that would have their own team of people that we'd have to work with, and that'll be a very thorough evaluation. As far as further down, you all the way from, I guess, 35th through 30th Street. I don't know, Glenn, did you want to jump in on that, or you want me to, or Justin, or? you
Yeah, I
wanna-
mean, I can start. It allows me to correct a mistake I made last week, which is saying that the parks we have go down to 38th. Obviously, as you just said, Brian, it goes, we show park between 39th and 37th. I said this last week, the project to be, it has, the project limits are that park on 37th, but we're quite aware of the Hell's Kitchen South Coalition neighborhood plan, and there's certainly a desire to repurpose parcels further south. And as Joe mentioned last week, and Joe Restuccia mentioned on land use committee, Joe raises this every time, that he wants to discuss this as part of the ULURP process. So we're aware of that. And I just think that beyond that, I don't know what else I can say, except that for that reason, it'll probably be dealt with sooner rather than later. And I think I'm getting a little beyond my expertise. Maybe Kirsten or Kate can stop me if I'm going too far. But this is an improvement to the whole bus network, and bringing these buses in and staging them and storing them in a more efficient way. So there's definitely opportunity further south than 37th Street. Now, you also mentioned the streetscapes and all that, and obviously, all I can say is at this point, we expect the situation to be an improvement over the current situation. You are right. There's a lot of mass. There's a lot of ramps and everything. But we're going to work very closely with this group throughout the process to make sure that the streets are not intimidating, that the neighborhood is traversable, that we help integrate the neighborhood through these buildings and not break it apart. So I think it just goes back to something I wanted to say earlier, which is many of the comments on this, many of the questions of like, what will this look like, or will it include X, are probably better framed as we, the community, would like to see X or Y, and then we can work to make those things happen to the best of our abilities. That's kind of the stage we're at. But they've both been things we've heard. Brian, we haven't dealt on the close level that we have dealt with Christine and others on this, but we've heard it. We're gonna address it. Hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm gonna go to Eric next. I just want to say that I just want to remind everyone the purview of this committee is transportation issues. So if we can focus on those with respect to this project, that would be great. And also, there's a follow-up conversation that's more the place for current Port Authority operations. And so some of the questions that I've seen in the chat, we're going to address during that presentation. Eric.
Hi. I was just thinking way back to the design competition. And one thing that I remember from some of the semifinalists in that is a number of them proposed using kind of this space around 10th Avenue that you're currently proposing to use still, this kind of, around the 40s and 10th. And then they also proposed connecting it to a 10th Avenue subway station. Now, I'm wondering, given that you are using this space, when do you plan to reach out to the MTA about possibly opening up that station? I understand that the cost of opening up this station would be a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of what you're planning for this project. So it seems like the extra benefits in terms of not making people charge over to 7th Avenue for the 7 line or 8th Avenue for the other lines would be pretty extreme, and maybe something that maybe a cost share could be put in place. But again, has any effort been made to reach out to the MTA to discuss this?
Not that I'm aware of at this point, no. But doesn't mean we're going to be talking to them extensively, because all our different subway lines tie into theirs. 11.
When do you plan on reaching out to them about this 10th Avenue station?
Which one are you referring to? Number 7 line one?
Yeah.
He's
Would
talking
it, would, it be,
41st.
would it be a new station? Is this the
Yeah.
new station they talked about?
He's talking about, let me clarify. There is when the number 7 was created.
Yep.
There is presumably there was supposed to be a stop at 41st Street,
Okay.
just before the curve to go down to Hudson Yard, and this became a casualty of the budget, which is that there was no more money left to finish the station, and so there is some kind of accommodation there for a fan plant for the station, and there is accommodation for an entrance, but there is no accommodation for the shell of the station. So it is a bigger job than just opening a station because the shell is not there, has to be built.
Yeah, I thought that was, I mean, I heard numbers that were significant numbers, not a few, it wasn't just a
Yeah, they are not small numbers. They are.
I think they were talking about $800 million for the project last I heard.
No, I think we're close to 1 billion now.
Well,
Yeah,
those are similar numbers.
Yeah, but that's kind of, okay.
Okay.
But
No,
this-
okay.
We should put it in. I think it's a very good point. And
Listen, it's a good point. Let's talk to them and then we'll, because
But
we.
here's what we have to do to be very clear. And Christine, you remember way back in the day when we were developing purpose and need, and I'd be like, okay, this belongs here, this belongs there, this is process, this is process. This is another one of those questions that relates to process. And we're always going to have to be utmostly sensitive to NEPA because that is the guiding of process that we
We
have.
need to put it in a different bucket.
Right, but this part, that conversation could begin once we are in NEPA because you look at mitigation as a whole, cumulative impacts. So that would be the timing in which something could occur.
Got it.
In terms of a conversation, getting into NEPA.
Thank you, thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for the
Thank you,
question.
Eric.
Janine, who else had a question from the public?
Miriam Fisher.
But it's
Go
not
ahead,
related
Miriam.
to that. It's not related to that at all.
Miriam, hi, is your question related to the Port Authority project we just, presentation we just saw?
No.
You're on mute.
This is a bike and compliance question, so I think we should push it to kind of new business.
Okay. All right. I think Lisa has a question about the overbuilds and PA bus parking lots, including the one on 30th Street. Please show anticipated use of all the overbuilds and PA bus parking lots, including the one on 30th Street. Can one of you address that question?
Sure, I guess, so Katie knows more of the details, but at least during the interim, we were planning on using that every space we had to offload enough of the bus operations during the construction that we could minimize or minimize the impact operations into the community. So what we were doing is utilizing the space that presently exists and is being used by Academy. Am I got the right carrier, Kate?
Yes.
As a storage and staging as well as a pickup and drop off. Kate, you want to pick up from there? That's the soundbite.
Sure. But I want to clarify, this is just during construction. So the images that you saw before, the deck overs, that green space is the final configuration, the 2 deck over areas kind of to the north. During construction, yes, we will utilize that space at 30th Street that right now is utilized by buses. Academy is there, and I think they operate Go Bus out of that space as well. So we'll be utilizing that property during construction to keep buses off the street. But we have not had any kind of discussion about long-term use of that property or the remainder of the Dyer corridor. I know a number of people have asked about that. I think that's a future discussion.
May I interject on that subject? I mean, at the same time, the governor has announced his grand plan to have the to have the High Line go through that area. So everybody's kind of saying, okay, what are the constraints and what should be done? You know, I think we need, again, Glenn, in a different discussion, in a different bucket, have a discussion about that and say what's going to happen.
Well, yes, and Glenn and I are aware of it, and we're working closely with the parties to make sure that
good.
We can change our hats very quickly, Christine.
Yeah.
I know.
Especially me. I don't have as much hair as Glenn.
I gelled it tonight because
I know you did. You look good, but I shouldn't joke around.
So I did it for.
Have I missed any questions from the public about the Port Authority's presentation on the planning of the replacement terminals? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next presentation.
So wait a minute. I think we need to make a motion. I think that what we would like to do is write a letter which captures pretty much all the question and turn them into, this is what we would like. And part of that letter, and I want to give you a heads up, the Port is to say we would like to have more detailed meetings with you now that everything is published, so that we can discuss the details in smaller groups. And we'll capture everything which has been discussed.
That would be, Christine, that would be very helpful. And yes, I've asked Glenn to start, and he's already working on it, start to lay out how do we move forward. Because we obviously, there's a lot of different things, moving parts, and we need to knock off one at a time and move on.
So somebody can make a motion for me.
I'd like to make a motion that we write a letter summarizing the points that we've made tonight.
Okay. We have a second.
I will second.
Thanks, Sarah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. All right. So that's part number one. And thank you so much, Steve. We couldn't have done it without you.
Send that letter. So send the email, put that in the letter to Glenn.
I'll send it to Rick. I'll send it
actually,
to Rick.
I can never be as good as Glenn, but
Are there visuals for this portion, or is it just?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So should we say goodnight and leave you guys alone?
Yes, if you want to go on with your life.
I gotta go have dinner now.
Thank you for your
Thank
presentation.
you so much.
Thank you. It's always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. Always pleasure being with you folks. Thank you so much. Looking forward to many more.
Okay. And
Janine, here it is.
Dale, we have a few slides, yeah. And Kirsten.
oh, you're leading this, Michael?
I'm not. Hello, everyone. Kirsten Jones from PABT Operations, and Jerry Lindemeyer from the Lincoln Tunnel, who's the general manager of the Lincoln Tunnel.
Okay.
There's just 2 or 3, I think 3 slides total. Just to
Yes.
give you a quick-
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Jones. I work at Port Authority Bus Terminal and Operations. Christine had sent over a couple of questions to us regarding operations during COVID and how COVID has affected both the carriers and our operation. So the following 3 slides summarize those questions. And I'm also available to answer any other questions you might have. So if you could go to the next slide. So in terms of operations impact, this data that you can see here on the slide is as of the first week of February. However, it is representative of the past several months. We've really plateaued since July. These numbers remain very, very solid and standard, only fluctuating a couple of percentage points in either direction. So the bus terminal is currently operating at 25% of normal passenger volumes. So that number, 30,725 daily passengers, that's the number of departures that we have. So you can double that number to say the number of people in and out of the terminal on a daily basis, assuming commuter trends. And the bus terminal is operating at about 63% of normal bus departures. So you can double that to say the number of buses in and out, kind of AM and PM peaks. That number 63% is an average of all the carriers that are currently reporting and are currently operating. New Jersey Transit is operating close to pre-COVID levels. So they're running approximately, generally around 85 to 88% of their normal operations. Some of their trips that are less commuter based, like their trips to the American Dream shopping center, have been reduced pretty substantially, but otherwise they're running close to normal schedules. Other carriers, excuse me, the private carriers have significantly reduced, and 2 carriers have suspended service right now. So you can see that the number of buses is obviously more than the number of passengers. So there are more people per bus. I'm sorry, fewer people per bus than normal. If you think back to pre-COVID, we were averaging about 45 people on a bus for a departure, and now it depends. It's slightly different on New Jersey Transit versus private, but it's generally between 17 and 22 people per bus. If you want to go to the next slide, Jerry Lindemeyer is going to talk a little bit more about the traffic.
Go ahead, Janine. Could you go to the next slide?
Oh, wait, go back one. Yeah, that one.
First, I'd like to say hello to Christine.
Hello, Jerry.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present to you and to answer any questions that you have. It's good to see you both. But yes, for everyone else on the line, so to speak, my name is Jerry Lindemeyer. I'm the general manager of the Lincoln Tunnel, and on this particular slide, we'll talk about just the impacts to the XBL from COVID. For those who aren't familiar with the XBL, XBL is an acronym that stands for the exclusive bus lane. It's a 2.5 mile contraflow bus lane that extends from the New Jersey Turnpike to the Lincoln Tunnel. And when I say contraflow bus lane, what we do is we take the left lane of the westbound traffic that it runs on we're talking about running on New Jersey Route 495. And we isolate that, and we have eastbound buses that go in the westbound lane. Typically, pre-COVID, our operating hours for the XBL was 6 a.m. to roughly 10 a.m. Pre-COVID, as it shows on the slides, the XBL averaged 1,800 daily buses and accounted for 65% of the total bus volumes during the AM period. In January 2021, the XBL averaged 840 daily buses. So you can see it was a significant decrease and accounted for approximately 50% of the total bus volumes during the AM period. Due to the decreased bus volumes, when we reopened, because it was shut down from March 25th of 2020 to September 21st of 2020, due to significant decrease in volumes. At that point, everyone was locked down in March and April. When we reopened on September 21st, we looked at the traffic numbers, and we open now at 6:30, and we typically will close at 9:15. Our closure is really based on safety, and it's the volume buses and the rate of the buses going through. Can we go to the next slide? This slide shows you what the traffic impacts from COVID. You could, on the left portion of the slide, it shows you what the monthly eastbound traffic in the tunnel. We're comparing it for 2020 versus 2019. The top line, the blue line, if you could, is our 2019 traffic, and the 2020 is in red. You can see in April that dramatic decrease down to about 500,000 vehicles in per month, and then from April it started to increase until we kind of reached a plateau in about August. And on the right side of the slide, it's broken down into the autos, the buses, and the trucks. All three of those vehicle types, everybody took a significant decrease in April. The autos, as can be seen, that there has between April and July, we started seeing increases in all forms, in buses, trucks, and in cars. The buses really kind of plateaued out at about 60%. The cars, the autos, continued to climb and plateaued at somewhere about 15% below the 2019. And the trucks increased, plateaued, and now we're starting to see an increase again in truck traffic.
Wow.
So that's kind of just the impacts that COVID has had on just the tunnel traffic that we've experienced. And just at this point, just open it up for any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, I have some question. Should I start?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Christine, I just, really quickly, I just want to, because they've been hanging out in the chat, I just want to raise two questions that were in the chat. There's a question about, and I know this is more DOT, but there's not, the curb cut on the northwest corner of Dyer and 40th Street does not have a curb cut and therefore is not accessible. Is there a reason for that? Well,
there's one of the columns that supports the bus ramp is located almost right there. It's a difficult corner. And I see it's from one of the comments in the chat. Yes, the whole area there is it's been a pigeon issue.
And then there's also the question about the 9th Avenue entrance being closed.
The 9th Avenue entrance?
Of the bus terminal, I can take that.
The bus terminal.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
So,
Joe. We were talking about the terminal. Yeah.
yeah. So we are still kind of evaluating weekly on which entrances and areas of the building to close and open based off of trying to concentrate our cleaning and kind of control open areas so that there is not a need to increase any more cleaning than necessary, because the cost of cleaning is pretty substantial right now. And so we're trying to best allocate resources as possible. So we are very aware of the desire, especially for the community, the Hell's Kitchen community, to reopen that 9th Avenue entrance. I'm very sensitive to it, and we are evaluating it as closely as possible, and will reopen it as soon as we are able.
Okay. Sorry, Christine, go ahead.
No, sure, makes sense. Well, thank you so much. These are really, really interesting and well presented details. I have a question about the gates and the lease of the gates. So are all the gates leased, or are some of them are falling off the schedule and will not be renewed?
Right now, all of the leases, so I have a caveat to what I'm about to say, but right now every gate is leased. There are carriers are still paying for their gates, even if they're not using the gate right now. And that's because they have operating agreements with us. Even if a carrier is offline, their gate is still available to them in case they decide to come back on, which does happen pretty regularly. They'll start running a route, so that gate needs to be available for them. There were, however, 2 gates that came up, were relinquished by a carrier because they reallocated their routes and kind of found a way to make themselves kind of operate a little bit more efficiently, and they relinquished 2 gates. So because of that, we do have, we call it an RFA, request for application, that is out in the public right now that bus carriers are bidding on. They're submitting applications that we're reviewing. And so a new carrier may be coming in for those 2 gates. Other carriers in the terminal can bid on them, as well as ones that are currently on the street, pending, of course, that they physically fit inside our building. So in the future, if other carriers decide that they are willing to relinquish more of their gates, that same process would happen. But right now, no carrier has indicated that that's the direction that they want to go.
And I'm asking that question because recently we had it's only 2 applications, one which had been put by DOT on 42nd Street, and another one which we just approved for 12th Avenue. And I'm just not clear of what's the process for telling those people, why don't you apply for the gates to the Port Authority, and how do they get in the queue, and how do they, do we send a letter? Do you send a letter to all the people which are on at curbside and say, hey, we have a gate, do you want to bid? Or
yeah, the person who's responsible for managing all the bus operating contracts has a waiting list that carriers have contacted her saying, I would like a gate in the future if one becomes available. So she's contacted all of them. She's also put them out for bid, but I will clarify. I'm going to go back and clarify what the process is to contact.
It also went to all the carriers who do have DOT permits, curbside
Oh,
permits.
they do? Okay.
Yeah, so the application did go to that, and then went to bus associations as well. So she put it out.
For example, we have had a lot of discussion, and Jeffrey knows that, and about I think Go Flex or a Flex bus, something like that. They are on a parking in close to the Penn Station, and it seems that the parking they're on is kind of illegal. They cannot do really bus loading and unloading from that. So now they are coming to us with a request for a land use permit. And we told them, why don't you go to the Port Authority? So I think and they are probably paying money right now to that parking lot.
Yeah, they're having to explore a zoning variance in order to
right, which is not going to fly. I mean, for whatever reason. So I'm really it would be very, very helpful if we understood how it's reached out, and that company Go Flex Bus is definitely in a little bit of a difficult situation. And exactly, they need probably 2 gates, which would be perfect. But it just happened like that. But others, we should be in a position to say. And then what is the length of those leases or agreements? Is it 1 year? Is it 5 years? What is it?
I don't know the actual contracts that they get into, but I can follow up with you. They are multi-year, but they're not exorbitant, and then they get renewed.
Because the thing which is striking as we are is very often people, some of them want just one, a time slot. And I'm wondering, as we are in this flux environment, whether, renting it by time slot would allow more people to get into the terminal. Like they could say, I want a gate, but if you had a gate which is booked for 1 time slot, maybe you can have 5 other companies which get other 5 slots. and they don't have like a fixed thing, because we are in a very fluctuant environment. And if you were selling, I'm sure when they sell the gates at the airport, they sell them by time slots. And I think there would be some value there, because I can see where some people would be, you know, if you go megabus, obviously megabus is going to say, I need my gate and I need it all the time, right? But a lot of the other smaller guys, they don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were offering, you know, time slots, I think that, you know,
I mean, what happens on the sidewalks is it becomes like a kind of black market of time slots. Once we grant or DOT grants a permit for a sidewalk drop off, and then there's like these little underhanded side deals about like, okay, you guys can use our space when we're not using it. So
we have a resale market, exactly what Dale
we'd
said.
love to preclude that black market for sidewalk space that doesn't belong to them in the first place.
And Christine, I think some of those app bus, you know, are kind of operating that way, where they're not actually the bus operator, they're just the app to the.
Yeah, they're like Uber bus operation.
As you are starting to recycle the gates and you have some available gates, maybe, and this is a special time, you know, you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe a shorter contract and a slot, selling by slot instead of the whole thing, may be way more adapted to the environment we are living with.
And you might wind up making more per gate.
Right. Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, you should be making more.
I used to work for Edison Properties, and they made the most money per square foot on the smallest unit of rental space, of storage space.
Yeah. So that would be then easier for us to push them to come to you, because you could say, oh yeah, we have time slots available. And then you can start the discussion, and then you can move their time slots a little bit. And if your gate is full, but it's a pity in a sense to say the gates are not being used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting idea. I'm going to take it back, and we're going to look into it.
We also reviewed an application from an operator who is based out of the Washington D.C. area.
Yeah. And
they had to meet specific standards for, I guess, the district that required them to install like anti-idling technology, like monitoring technology on their buses. I think it's available from Sason is the name of the company.
Yeah.
And we would love to privilege companies that have that tech. I mean, it's also a little like, you know, it would go a long way towards, assuming they're meeting all the safety standards, it would go a long way towards treating some of the smaller providers, in a little more, in a friendlier manner, as opposed to like always dealing with the big guys, and kind of like being sort of a, lending a monopolistic, dynamic to the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And if we had known, and if there was, those people needed only 6 departures a day, which is not a lot. So if there had been a way to rent by the slot, it would have been a perfect customer for you. It would lend itself really well to that.
Yes.
So I guess Jeffrey has a question.
Yeah, just 2 points. I mean, it's the short term, it's a shared space, and the port holds the lease and rents the times. I mean, we're seeing this happen in almost every model of business. It's like a reservation at a restaurant for Le Francois, and then Berthet gets it 2 hours later, and then Corvino. And I think they would really thrust the port into the 21st century in terms of planning, which would be really amazing to have the Port Authority lead the way on something like this when the city really struggles with it. So I want to just shift for 1 second on the data that you presented, which is wonderful, and thank you for that. Data is king. Is this public data? Like, I know it's public tonight because you made this presentation, and so it's shareable. But are these numbers in a accessible database outside of presentations like this for interested groups or for the city to regularly access or anything like that?
Yeah, all of our traffic. Jerry, you want to talk to it? Sorry.
Go ahead. Ladies first.
Sorry, I did not mean to jump in. All of the traffic data is available on our website. This is kind of a consolidated. We manipulated slightly only for.
Forgive me, I'm not regularly on the Port website.
You're missing out. It's a great.
I am.
Kirsten's right. You can go on and it's PANYNJ.gov and just go into the tunnels, bridges, and terminals section, or tunnels and bridges, and you can just go through and you'll be able to see some of the traffic data.
Thank you very much. And I too would like to be back meeting in person at that beautiful community room at the Port Authority.
Oh,
so.
yeah.
Do we have more questions from the committee?
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay, and I think we answered the questions that came up from the public. Are there any further questions on current?
Colleen had her hand up. I brought her over.
Sure. So this is regarding current COVID impact operations of the Port Authority. Hello? Who was it, Janine?
It's Colleen.
Oh, hey, Colleen.
Here's Colleen.
She's muted.
Colleen, can you hear us?
She's coming for the next thing, right?
Oh,
hi, I'm here. Sorry, I just unmuted myself. How are you?
Great.
Good.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
No,
Oh, we're just wrapping up the Port Authority's presentation on COVID impacts on their current operation. Did you have something to say, or are you here for the next
You know
item?
what? I had wanted to say you had brought up the issue as to why there is no pedestrian
Oh, yes.
at that particular location. And it's possible the reason why is because it might be a complex location where there might be a pedestrian signal or a street light. Eventually, later on down the road, it will be submitted to DDC so they can reconstruct and create a permanent pedestrian ramp there.
Okay, great,
So
Colleen.
that's on the PA land, right?
And we will work with the PA on that. We have in the past.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Thank you for your input on that, Colleen.
you're welcome.
Do we have any more questions on Port Authority operations and COVID impacts? Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. And
Well,
see.
so are we sending a letter with our recommendations, or what are we doing?
I think we can
Kirsten, is it helpful?
capture
to
the
send a letter?
recommendations for time sharing docs at the Port Authority in a letter, right?
I make that motion.
Second.
To encourage the Port Authority to create a slip share program, which could generate more revenue for the port and remove more buses from the streets of the city.
And
I second that.
And that CB4, our committee would be happy to coordinate with interested.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you very much for this presentation as well.
Thank
Christine
you,
and Dale,
Kirsten and
thank you.
Jerry. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. Be
Thank
safe,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, members.
You too.
Okay, we're going on to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Michael.
That was a lot
Right.
that was a lot of good stuff from our pals. Our Port Authority.
Port Authority.
Okay, the next item is revocable consent application for a stoop and fenced-in area at 224 West 22nd Street. Is there somebody presenting? Did somebody show up, Janine?
No, I don't see anybody on.
Okay, what do we know about this application? Do we have anything?
I read the document, and it's very similar to the 25th Street that we did some time ago. The only difference is that there is a step which is protruding outside of the the railing, and I don't know what you feel. I mean, it seems to be that it's going to be a little bit of a tripping hazard.
Do they state the clearance, the remaining clearance?
The clearance is fine. It's 5.4, 5.4 or something like that, which is more than the other one was.
So we're not dealing with like a tree pit or anything else that would.
There is a tree pit.
There's a tree pit.
But the clearance is okay. I mean, it's okay. It's as okay as the last one, which was not okay, but it's okay, right? But I'm more concerned about the fact that the last step is protruding, and so if you are walking, you could trip.
When you say protruding, you just
let me.
It's like Dale. It comes off. It doesn't stop. It's not flush with the rest of the.
Right.
Oh, it's protruding.
Sidewalk. It comes off onto the sidewalk a little bit. It's not sort of flush with what we would think of as maybe the stoop line or like the fence line, basically.
Yeah.
There is a fence line, and once they do this, one step is going to
extra
encroach into the sidewalk.
So would you prefer that the fence line lines up with the end of this at the end of
No, because the fence line is aligned with the other fence lines.
Right.
The slope is in.
Janine,
is the architect.
Can you bring up the plan?
And Viren, did you have some input?
Yeah, it's not untypical of last step protruding beyond the fence. Actually, if you look up on Google Street View, just two buildings on the same block, you have a similar condition. Yes, and I think it has something to do with the sort of height of the parlor floor. Okay. And the code requires each step to be a particular height, so they may not have a way of getting around it unless they sort of read out the manner in which you climb up the steps.
Yeah. Could you go to the next page? Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Stop 1 second to the one before. This one. You see the line, line of the grid, and then the last step is encroaching on it, is beyond on the sidewalk. If you think that it's fine and that there are others like that on the street, I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, I don't really see the issue. I understand your concern, but I think it's, as Viren said, it's fairly typical.
Okay. All right. So do we have?
And it's bigger clearance than last time.
Yes, it is.
I mean, as long as the clearance is as required.
Well, I don't know what is as required anymore, but this one is bigger than last time.
Because the key here is this is coming, you can see the property line. Everything in red is past the property line.
Yeah.
So that's why it's
Oh, so this is like a grandfather situation?
The revocable consent.
Right, but I mean.
It's the same thing as last time. It's the same situation.
But it's not, this isn't new, it's rebuilt.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's an existing building, and what they are doing is using public space to put that portion of a stairs.
Yeah, Christine, we can ask them to push the stairs back in if it's possible. And if you see the last step just before the door,
yeah,
that's coming out a little bit. So if there is a way for them to push the stairs back in, which I doubt, but I think it's a question worth asking.
That's what the other guys had done last time on 25th Street. They had pushed everything in, so they moved in.
Is this a single residence or a multi-dwelling?
I think it's meant to be a single residence.
I think that's why they're changing it, because the design now doesn't have that staircase.
Oh, they want
Right.
also an entrance to.
I think they want to basically have a garden apartment and
Yeah.
then, you know, a single family in the top 3 or 4, basically.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, so they're doing more than just putting a stairs. They actually are also providing a stairs to go below the new flight of stairs. So there is a kind of height clearance issue, and that's what they're playing with. So it might be a little difficult for them, but we can always ask, let them say
No,
no.
but if we ask, I mean, we would have to deny unless. And I don't know whether we, I mean, if they were here, we could have the discussion, but we don't.
All right.
If you say this is like that on another one, I mean, we can let it go. That's
Yeah,
fine.
Melody's also chiming in and saying that this is typical of her block. She lives on the block.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the question for the committee is that do we want to keep sort of allowing this kind of encroachment into right of way for the sidewalk? So that's a sort of,
Yeah, I wouldn't, but if it's like that 2 blocks a little further away, it's going to be hard to argue.
Yeah, I mean, there's the context, and also, I mean, it's a brownstone stoop, so it's like it's an archetypal design element of
Okay, I mean,
like this.
if somebody makes a motion, we can vote on that.
Do we hear a
Anybody?
motion?
Huh?
Do we hear a motion?
So moved. Based on the summary.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor? So we are voting to approve the revocable consent.
Right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, we're moving on. All right. And now we have the discussion of the state of the sidewalk survey. I think you've all seen the version of the state of the sidewalk survey that we distributed, and we're inviting your feedback, input. What do we say?
I think this is a phenomenal survey that will hopefully shed a whole bunch of light on how we can begin to advocate for the city to actually start caring about pedestrians and the space that we utilize, which is the sidewalk most of the time.
I echo what Jeffrey just said. It's going to give us a lot of insight to where we could move forward.
I think we were talking about, like, I think it's important to really get this distributed far and wide as much as possible. So obviously,
I do have a question about how this is going to be, who's the owner of the survey? And so, you know, if I put my work hat on for a minute and the meatpacking bid distributes this, how do I tell my members or those from the public on our list who's going to get this information? And I don't know that needs to lead the headline, but basically, who's the owner? Is it the community board? Is it one of our nonprofit partners? Sort of what's the story behind it?
Well, I think the way we did it is we did it as the community board in partnership with the ACES committee. Blake is online, and he did contribute a ton of things, as well as Alan. And the idea would be that together we send it out, and then it can be used by anybody. I mean, we can also send it, and you can add your name to it and say, hey, we have this thing.
I guess I just wanted to make sure that the community board was indeed the owner, because I think that gives it broader authority for bids, nonprofits, block associations to really click forward and send it throughout the community and the borough, frankly.
That's the idea. So I thought if we approve that now, we would Dale and I and Blake and Alan would ask Jesse whether we can send it out, or I think in the past we have done that. You know, we didn't go to the exec, we didn't go to the full board, we just send it out. And
yeah,
then
it's a survey.
And so that would be the next step, is to send it out and start pushing it out to everywhere we can.
Yeah, I mean, I just like to make sure that it gets out to all the block associations, NYCHA groups, you know, tenant groups, what have you.
And maybe Janine can help a little bit on that. On pushing
Christine,
it. Yeah.
Christine, just to Jeffrey's point, like a minor suggestion is if, you know, this is being framed as like a board-owned survey, we should just also add that to your kind of preamble. So if the link gets shifted around, like that context is always there.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
To have, like, so people are like, wait a minute, what is this? Who am I? Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. At the front, yes, we'll do that.
Maybe it can be put on the CB4's website as well. I mean, community boards quite often reach out for community needs assessment studies, so to speak.
Right.
I mean, people can come to the board meetings and express their opinions and views. We don't typically take them down and say, you know what, these are the things that came up. But this would be another mechanism to actually instigate that sort of response from the community. And I think it can be very easily be put on CB4's website. I do know some community boards in Brooklyn have been doing that, particularly in Bushwick. So I think we have some sort of, you know, examples to go by.
I mean,
the last time we did anything like that was a long time ago. We did a sidewalk, oh God, that was so long ago, sidewalk policy survey. And we send it out and people say, well, what's more important for you? The question, and the result is in the policy we put together, which said, okay, we want to have, you know, a trash can, we want to have a bus stop, and we want to have one more thing, I can't recall what it is. And then everything else we don't want, which was really interesting. And people were very clear, you know, saying these are our priority. And that educated us on how to prioritize the obstruction, in a sense.
I mean, in terms of meeting people where they are, it would be amazing if like, you know, the survey, or at least a link to the survey or a QR code to the survey appeared on the DOITT kiosks, and people would literally be on the sidewalk and say, scan this and open the survey and answer it.
Well, we can ask, I mean, you know, the community board, the office publishes stuff there, so we can ask them to help publish on the kiosk.
Yeah.
Right.
Then we'll get a lot of complaints about the kiosk.
And just, we want responses from people in board 4, people who work or live in board 4, or we are happy to have it be broader. Okay.
We ask for the zip code for that as a proxy for CB4, you know, because if we ask, hey, are you part of CB4? I think half of the people don't know.
Right.
But if you ask them to put the zip code, everybody knows their zip code, and we can extract from that.
I think it's also fair game to include people who still pass through or work in the neighborhood as well.
Oh, absolutely. But I want to make sure that we're open to the fact that this gets forwarded a couple of times. It's a citywide policy we want to begin to think about.
Yeah. We want to get information about our district, but we also want a bigger picture of what's going on out there.
Yeah, and if they answer the question about zip code, then we can sort the data accordingly.
They have to answer the zip code. We put it as a prerequisite. I think that's the only thing. Okay, well, that sounds really good.
All right, we're going.
And I have to say, Blake did a fantastic job on giving me a zillion of comments, which were extremely on point, as well as Dale, and everybody gave me very good comments. So that was a good team effort.
It's a good survey.
We're gonna launch a survey.
Launching a survey. Okay, so we have a vote there.
Do we need a vote on it?
Yeah, we are motioning to.
Do we hear a motion?
Can I just wait? Can I just ask though, if we do that, then we need that will require a full board vote. And this, I think, is just going to be administrative, right? Like,
exactly.
So let's just
Motion
keep it administrative. The board's doing a survey, so the motion is withdrawn.
Right.
The survey is not, but the motion is.
Right. Okay, that's exciting.
Right.
Good night, guys.
Bye, Viren. Yeah, I saw your comment. Thank you.
I think you have one last
item, old new business.
No, these were the comment from Miriam. Is she still there or not?
I'll just share briefly that the Empire Station Complex Community Advisory Council, the ESC-CAC, had a meeting 2 days ago. I'm on that because for a number of reasons, CB4 is taking this up jointly through transportation and Chelsea Land Use. And then we're also working with Board 5 on it. So as first vice chair, that's why I'm sitting on that committee. The scope is out and they're going to be releasing the draft EIS as it relates to the development sites around Penn Station. And so we're in talks to have a joint Chelsea Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting in March so that the board has an opportunity to opine on this at the public hearing on March 23rd. There's a formal process that's been kicked off, and so that's where we are in the timeline, and we'll be able to comment on the draft environmental impact statement.
So it's there is a high probability that next month our committee will be moved to
a different date, likely March 15th, which is a Monday.
Rob is raising his hand.
It's 9 o'clock.
Rob, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just have a question after Jeffrey's finished.
Okay.
I mean, there's some really good things about the proposal, like the fact that the design guidelines are where they're considering things like required bike parking in the buildings, that we're actually seeing I was delighted to learn this, and Gail Brewer even applauded it, that they're eliminating some parking garages based on some of the sites that are going to be demolished. And while they're still planning for there to be 100,000 square feet of parking garages, this is what's amazing. Hang on, Christine. It's not a requirement to build. So we're removing the idea of required accessory parking from this development site. So developers can choose to build no more than 100 parking spots per development, which would total no more than 100,000 square feet. I mean, this is a pretty transformative step because the city of New York has required parking space development based on the size of your development, but the state is taking the route that if buildings want to, they can, but it's not a requirement for the building, which is awesome.
It's awesome.
The other couple of things that again, this is in the design guidelines. This will be a GPP, a general project plan, which runs through the state, which circumvents ULURP. But Department of City Planning is indeed considered a partner on the project. I had a phone call with my colleague, Layla Law-Gisco from CB5, and we called each other and we were like, should we feel so good about that meeting that we just had with the state right now? Because there were some they seem to be responding in the way that the state can. They're trying to figure out how they can actually make this a modern development and not have changed the SECRA and environmental standards to address it. There will be a federal NEPA environmental statement, review process. So we're gonna have to loop in our congressional representatives. There's also a thing that we'll have to consider as our transportation committee. The railroads are gonna be releasing the Penn Station master plan soon. And this will be a project that runs separate from the GPP for the Empire Station Complex. Another key factor here is that there's 8 sites up for development. Only one of them is in Community District 4. The rest are in Board 5. However, a big part of the governor's play here is that we would get Penn Station expansion, an addition of tracks to the south of 31st Street. That is no longer an absolute, in that parts of the project could move forward and provide improvements to the current Penn Station without a guarantee for the expansion of tracks to the south, which I think is good and bad, but I want to just say that so that we pay attention to that, and hopefully some folks can dig in on that more at our joint committee meeting. Because if we're gonna tolerate all this development, and the point is for it to be a cash machine to pay for the improvements in the track expansions, we need to make sure we get that expansion.
Yeah, it looks, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like they are saying that the developers can earn their excess, air rights by doing some improvement, but not by funding the station.
So there's two things, right? There's current Penn Station improvements and enhancements, and then there's the track expansion to the south. So yes, to a certain extent, you're right. We're adding more lipstick to the pig that is Penn Station in some way on this. The key thing that we're in lockstep on Community Board 5 with, which is great. Back in January, Board 5 endorsed a plan to relocate Madison Square Garden to 31st Street, 34th between 6th and 7th on the south side of the block. ESD doesn't want to touch that, Empire State Development Corporation. They see that as out of scope for this. And I asked whether or not they considered, how do you mitigate tractor trailer trucks on the sidewalk loading at Madison Square Garden for this project? And they told me that was out of scope for the study because it was about an existing facility, not about the new developments that will happen around Madison Square Garden. So I think it's important that we keep that pressure up because there's politics at play here, which is the governor's office and the governor wanting to do something, and ESD, which has a very set application and scope and plan that it can work through. And there's definitely movement and interest. We have a more favorable federal government. Amtrak is a huge player in this. There's considerable new subsidies on the table.
But I think
there's a lot to happen. And the permit for Madison Square Garden expires in 2 years.
We need to be really careful that all these developers are not given a ton of air rights in exchange for minimal improvement to the transit.
So we do have to understand how the financing of this is going to work, because there's certain developers in the area who may just want to put the air rights on their balance sheet. And if that were the case, would they still be, if they didn't do the development, if they just held on to the air rights, would they be needing to pay for all of the improvements?
Yeah, and I think we want to. I mean, if they get air rights and they get an improved balance sheet, that's a benefit to them. That means that they
so
can
no matter what, we need to make sure that goes into the station's improvement and expansion.
Right, and expansion. Expansion, because the expansion this is what the idea is. The idea is to do all this development so there is money for the expansion. So just doing a little bit thing here and there shouldn't be enough to. Otherwise, these are El Cheapo air rights. They get air rights for nothing. So that's
the other key transportation thing which we'll hear about is that they're going to initiate what's called a TMP, a transportation monitoring plan. And because this project is 10 years away, things will be different in 10 years. They're going to invent something besides a bike and a scooter for people to get around with. And so how do we plan for that space? And the TMP will be able to provide teeth for recommendations to make changes closer to the time of construction and actual creation of things around the area, so it can meet the needs of the day and not just be sort of a Hudson Yards, no bike consideration, a mall from the 90s, that kind of thing. And that's something we haven't specifically dealt with as it relates to a GPP in my experience or knowledge in this before too. So,
wow, that was intense.
I mean, there's some real positives, I think, here.
Yeah.
And in the non-land use factor, they're considering studying the site in CB4 for mixed use and including housing in that, 30%, which is considered affordable by the state right now. But Gail asked for 100%. CB5 is going to ask for 100%. I'm sure our housing and land use committees will also ask for 100%. So I hope that we stand firm on that as well.
As you were mentioning the parking, I just thought about something we need to put in our letter for the port authorities, which is in the 4 towers that they are going to build. We don't want any parking. You know?
Yeah, there's enough bus parking down below.
Because I mean, I'm just like, oh my God, if they build that and there is huge parking everywhere, we don't want that. And Sarah, you have, Dale, Sarah may have a little update on.
Well, let's go to Rob because he had his hand up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Rob?
No, you can get me at the end. I just have one quick small question. I'd rather hear more of what's going on with this.
Okay, Sarah?
I don't have an update right now.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Rob,
I wish I did, but I don't. I mean, just so folks know, like I'm just running some back channels and trying to get connected with other folks at DOB separately, but
okay.
you know, I have no formal update.
Rob, we have a couple of new business requests from the public. So do you want to say your piece next and then we'll go to the public attendees?
Yeah, of course. Just a quick question. Have we heard back from the MTA about cash handling procedures yet?
No.
Didn't the letter come today?
We just got a letter today, this afternoon.
Oh,
yeah, there's a letter. There's a letter back from them today.
Yeah, I can send it around tonight. I'm not sure if everyone got it.
What does it say?
Let me see.
Yeah, sorry, in general, do we typically get emailed when responses are received? Because I don't think I've ever received a response to any of our letters.
We get a letter which is sent to us, and if we do a good job, we send it to you. And if we do a bad job, we don't send it to you.
Yeah, that's on us.
That's on us. Jesse, but I think I just sent you something, right? I just sent around something. I tried to, but sometimes.
Well, the gist of the letter says that they can't have any station agents at the moment at the booths, but then there's other options that passengers can use, such as using a debit or credit card at the vending machines, applying for an easy payment card, or downloading the OMNY app for contactless payment.
I mean, that's why I don't pay attention to the MTA, because their answers are completely useless.
Opaque.
Yeah, that was completely useless. The whole point of this was for people who may not have credit cards, debit cards, people who are poor, the homeless, you know, where you only deal with cash. And it just, there are people sitting in booths. They're just not doing anything with cash. All other, New York City, all other cash operation procedures are going except for the MTA. This is ludicrous.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I think we generally want to refer to folks who don't have access to cards as the unbanked, because that's more clear as to who they are. Okay, I'm gonna take. We have Eric has a question and Miriam. So Miriam, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? I think I'm unmuted. I had trouble. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I had trouble pasting the whole piece. I'd like to, it's not that long. I could just, it's in the beginning and some of it got deleted somehow despite my attempt 5 times. I'm not a techie.
We read the
heart of it. They're concerned, and I'm really trying to bring this into the public dialogue, just like they this disability advocacy group submitted testimony to the city council. If there were wider support, and maybe the board would also do something similar. I don't think I have to take pictures. I think anybody going on the street sees that the bikes, which I support, a long time supportive of anything that's not a car. I myself have been hit by a car. My husband was one of the founders of Auto Free New York. This is something I've been involved with for decades, and I just had back surgery unsuccessfully, and my balance is very off, and I'm very concerned about being and many bikers have come within a few feet of me, and I lose my equilibrium. I think it's an educational issue that's citywide, that there are many new bikers, there are many delivery people, there are people now biking to work, all of which I support, but they are going through lights. And I think the aim of Vision Zero is zero, the aim, none. And even if the statistics are low, which was quoted last time in Chelsea, which I'm doubtful about because I've heard many people spending a year in rehab. My own physical therapist told me he works with many people in rehab who've been hit by bikes. I hear from a nurse in Bellevue about some of the seriousness of accidents. I don't know what's reported. The point is that seniors, people with disabilities, pedestrians are endangered by bicycles going through lights on the sidewalk, going the wrong way. I have reached out to various forums, including the head of Transportation Alternatives, which is big on Vision Zero, and represents the bikers, and they acknowledged my concern, but never said anything publicly. I think there has to be more public statements about this. I reached out to some of our legislators, including, Corey Johnson, Brad Holman, who said, email him with a plan. We stood on the street together when he was campaigning during the primaries and watched the bikes go through the lights. Everybody sees that. What can we do to ensure safety? One of the proposals, but this is a major undertaking, is just like some of the scooters are now going to be licensed, to licensing the bikes. So there's more transparency, and they can be addressed if they jeopardize safety by going through lights and on the sidewalk, which is illegal. What can we do to ensure the safety of everyone, and how can the community boards support that?
Okay, thanks, Mary. So I think we have in the past discussed like advocating for a kind of like a master plan, a cyclist master plan for the city. And there was talk about like inculcating a culture of compliance among cyclists. And I don't know if we can roll this set of concerns about compliance and the culture and like the educating and getting out the word about safety compliance to cyclists and scooter riders to that initiative. What do you say, Christine?
I don't know. It seems that, I was yesterday at the precinct, Midtown North, and there were also a lot of concern there of people being on the sidewalks, etc. And it seems to me that there are two things. One is education. The other thing is that the design, which is the traffic light, are not timed to help the cyclist. And there is a way to time the traffic light so that the cyclists get a green wave, and the cars get a green wave, and the pedestrian as well. And if it was like that, then the incentive for people to go through a red light would be much, much less, because they would not encounter a red light until after 10 blocks. So, on the rest of the time, there would be clearly a red light, and they would, because they would have gone so far, there would be a better incentive to do that. So maybe.
Are the lights timed? Because I have looked for that in Chelsea. I know they've been extended because pedestrians couldn't get across in time. And I know with the beginning of Vision Zero, there was a lot of remodeling and timing and making the green lights longer so people can get across. I am not aware of anything that I've noticed in the lights in Chelsea that would signal that. I certainly support that the pedestrians and the bicyclists getting permission to go ahead of the cars. That But I think
So the
it's
change,
one, yeah.
the test,
Sorry.
the test of those traffic light has been done in, is being done in Brooklyn. And
I
in
heard there's
Brooklyn,
a
the
pilot
DOT
project.
is testing a new sequencing of lights so that the cyclist can have, you know, like a green wave, essentially, which would make a very big difference, which does make a very big difference. And so I think that we could write about education and that and say you need to do both. You need to change the timing of the lights, and you need to essentially you know, do a lot more education. There has to be a way to do
Foster
it.
a culture of compliance.
Yeah, but how? How is
I would say through, I mean, we talked about this with City Bike when they were here. We talked about this, and we talked about the, you know, approaching the DOT with, like, you know, the idea of rolling out a cycling master plan, where there would be educational or informational components. I don't know if
Can this be sent as a letter to the council? Redundancy doesn't hurt, and even if they've heard it from many sources, one more source, you know, adds to the power of the concern of the public.
It's a fair request. I mean, if we talk about those two things, the design of the signals and the education, I think these are things which make sense, because the signals definitely are something that would be very good for cyclists and for pedestrians.
so that would be a letter to DOT.
Yeah.
Referencing the pilot project in Brooklyn.
Right. And talking about rolling out some new education for where it seems that the point you are making, that there is so many more people which are, you know, riding.
I think part of the non-compliance of late has to do with the outdoor restaurants, and also just the COVID related chaos on the streets.
Oh, yeah.
I think it started as the streets cleared, which has changed, and more people were riding bikes, and many want to just, you know, zoom ahead because they want to keep going, and more the delivery people, and more people being encouraged to ride to work, which they didn't before. And I think the whole world has changed, you know, since COVID. And I think the restaurants were the last few months. This has been going on really for, you know, a year since
All right.
March.
So what do you think? Do we?
Well, would
no,
you?
I'm talking about everybody.
We're bringing it to the committee, Miriam.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
So do we have a motion, or David, do you have a problem with that?
State exactly. I want to hear this again because there was so much going on. What exactly?
It would be a
You want something
letter.
with
We're
lights.
talking about a letter to the DOT asking them to, in referring to the pilot project in Brooklyn, to change signals along avenues to give cyclists a green wave, like a series of green lights, and also kind of fostering more compliance among cyclists with their outreach and education programs, whether they are, you know, broadcasting stuff on the Do It kiosks, or whether they are whatever tools the DOT has to foster compliance among cyclists.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good. I mean, but you know, like I can speak as the queen bee, and like Christine was saying last month about we're like bees. She's right. So I mean, in terms of the education, I don't know what good it'll do, but we could do that. But I certainly like to do a green wave of cycling, because it's terrible on 8th Avenue. 9th Avenue is wrecked. That's not because of the lighting. It's just because of the.
I think it's an interesting idea to couple the two asks, because we're saying, like, we want to help the cyclists, but we also want to improve safety conditions.
Right. compliance, which is, you know, triple E. I mean, the Vision Zero normally is engineering, education, and enforcement. So we want to ask about the first two.
Okay, no, I think it's great. The only thing I would add, and this is really not, it's out of our, it's not part of this, is that, you know, we talk about cycling compliance, but I mean, I think the more important issue would be for motor vehicles, compliance for that. I mean, that's.
But it's not that letter. It's not this letter.
I know.
Well, the thing about motor vehicle compliance is like there is an infrastructure and a regime to require compliance.
Right, but while it's
yeah, that could be approved. Though. That's I guess my point.
While the cars are moving, it's a state law, so the city police don't enforce it. But yeah, I mean, I would go along there.
Okay. All right, so do we have a motion on this letter? You're going to make the motion, David.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, we're writing a letter to the DOT about the green wave signaling and fostering a culture of compliance among cyclists, given the current circumstances. All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Thanks, Rob. We got the votes. Thank you, Miriam. Okay, Eric, did you have something else?
Yeah, although actually there was a good segue there about city cops not enforcing motor vehicle laws. I thought it was on the agenda initially, but I guess it got moved over because the Port Authority came on.
Yeah.
But
I think are we taking that up next month?
Yeah, we want to take it up next month. Is that okay?
We're going to do it for the March meeting, Eric.
Okay, that sounds great. Just as a brief update, nothing is happening. It is currently remaining laid over in committee, this bill, which causes me to worry. But I'm not, I'm not an expert on how these things move along.
Well, we'll see where we're at when we convene next.
And what other background that I didn't give last? Yeah, the mayor's trying to kill it because the cops don't like it, and the other placard classes. But thank you, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Eric. I think that's all the new business.
That does it.
And do we have anything else? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to
shut
it down.
Adjourn.
I hear a second.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.